Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 through 13. Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 through 13. Family drama. Family drama. Family drama. Here we find Abram and Lot as they travel together. An uncle and his nephew. They find themselves initially between the good and the bad. Choices in life must be made. For we see early on in verse 3 that they were between Bethel and Hai. Bethel on one side being the house or the place of God. Hai on the other side being the ruins or the ash heap, the trash heap. A place where one should not want to go. Sometimes we find out that we are at a crossroads in life. A place where we must choose between those things that are good and those things that are bad. And so here we find uncle and nephew. We find them as they are situated in a domestic argument. One that was not created between the two of them. But as we see in this particular text, we recognize that it began with their herdmen. It began with their resources. The text says that they had so much that they could not dwell on the land together. You know, I really don't fully understand this concept, for I recognize that sometimes it happens within the church, it happens within families where folks seem like they're doing so good that they cannot dwell together. I don't quite understand how families can't do good together. Far too often we allow ourselves to become trapped by our things and by our environment, rather than realize that we are yet family. Abram makes certain to tell his nephew that in this instance, I recognize that our folk can't get together. In verse 8, he says that I recognize that there's strife, but that's between our herdmen, but you've got to remember that we are brethren. Sometimes I think that even in this political climate, there are Christian folk fighting against each other because of bipartisan activities. But let me tell you that no matter what the world is doing inside of the house, we must remember that we're still brothers. Oh, Sister Featherson, it doesn't matter if you are Dixiecrat, Democrat, or Republican. What matters at the end of the day is that all of us all be following the same God. No matter what party we ascribe to, no matter what candidate that we look upon, we must look to God first. For all of our deliverance, all of our answers, all of our salvation comes through God. And Abram reminds his nephew, we must remember that we are brethren at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. We are still family. And so there's some things that we need to recognize. So in verses 7 through 9, we see that the herdmen, the cattlemen, they're fighting against each other, but Abram wants to make sure that there's no strife between us. Abram acts as the elder. He acts as the father. He acts as the one who is leading, who is guiding. He acts like the one who is blessed. And so we must remember that we must put our pride aside. See, he could have very easily pulled the card and said, you know what, I'm the oldest. I'm the one that the promise has been given to. I'm the one, boy, that brought you out of Egypt with me. I'm the one, boy, that brought you from the land of Ur with me. I am the one who the Lord has blessed, and the blessings that you feel today have come because of me. But Abram was unable to allow his pride to be put aside and say, guess what? We don't have to fight about this. I'm a blessed man. I know where my blessings come from. I know what God has done for me. I often wonder why blessed folk are so mad. See, you don't have to be mad when God is blessing you. You don't have to be mad when God has put his arms around you. You don't have to be mad when you know that you're the head and not the tail. You don't have to be mad because you ought to know the end of the story. See, we don't have to be mad at the crucifix. We don't have to be mad at the tomb. We don't have to be mad because we have the blessed assurance. We know the end of the story. We know that he rose on the third day morning. And so we have victory. We don't have to be prideful. We don't have to have our chest stuck out. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to give in to the devil, because the Lord has already charted everything for us. So we must put our pride aside in order to circumvent the arguments and the fights. But then he tells his nephew, he says, I'll let you choose. You can go this way and I'll go that way. And if you go that way, I'll go this way. And so what happens in verse 10 is Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld the plain of Jordan, and that it was well watered. He looked and he saw that everything was good on that side. He said, I'll take this. Let me tell you, in order for us to pass by the family drama, we've got to put our pride aside. But not only that, we can't be greedy. Because sometimes our greed will get the best of us. If he had really opened his eyes, there was a better situation. The best situation would have been if he would have taken on the same demeanor of his own. And say, you know what, you're right. We don't have to fight. But at the same time, not only do we not have to fight, we can get along together. Because here we recognize that these folk who are working around them are really working for them. And so how can you let the things that work for you end up working against you in the family of God? When God has blessed you, don't allow your car and your house and your status, don't allow your clothes to get you to the place where you can't fellowship, where you can't worship, where you can't connect with your brothers and sisters. Don't allow your education and your pedigree and your alma mater to get so far away from you that you allow yourself to no longer recognize that you are a child of God and forget where you came from. And so you got to remember, this is family that I'm dealing with. But he decided to overlook family and look to the best situation for himself. How many times are we looking out for ourselves? How many times have we looked and said, you know what, I want this. And what looks better is better than dealing with my family. But not only that, as we see, he chooses that part. He also says it's well watered. This looks better. We've got to know that we've got to put our pride aside. We can't be greedy, but then we've got to recognize that the grass is not always greener on the other side. Sometimes you look to the other side, but there's something there that just around the corner. For the text gives us some foreshadow, because it tells us there in verse 10, it says that he lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. And then it says, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. You notice here it said before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Sometimes when you look at the greener side, you don't recognize that pasture is on its way for its winter season. You don't understand that a drought is on its way. It might look better on that side, but you don't know what is ahead. This is what happens when we decide to choose on our own. This is what happens when we decide that we're going to pick out our own future without consulting with God. Because sometimes a thing might look better, but in fact, there's destruction just around the corner. And so he looks to this greener grass. He looks to this greener pasture, and he thinks that it might be better if I go this way. Might be better if I take that which looks good. But let me tell you, sometimes what you see is not what you get. Let me tell you that there are times where we want the very thing that is going to hurt us down the road. And so this young man decides through his greed, through his allowing the enemies of his camp to seem like they had the right answer, to allow strife to come in his family between the one who had blessed him. How dare you forget that the Lord used your uncle to help you? How dare you forget that you've been blessed because this man allowed you to have some things? Should never forget that the Lord has blessed us. And so when the Lord blesses us, we ought to walk in his blessings and in his spirit and in his joy. Families sometimes have a whole lot of falling outs. You try to help folk and they do all kinds of things to you. But I tell you, when you're blessed, all you've got to do is keep on walking with the Lord. You don't have to hinder them. You don't have to hurt them. Just keep on walking with the Lord. And so Abram didn't allow this to bother him, although he decided to let his nephew go. What else could he do? There comes a time in our life where we've been walking alongside folk and we've been with them and we've helped them, but they decide that they want to go on. And so what you've got to do is take on the spirit of Abram and let them go on their way. There comes a time where we've got to cut the strings so that we don't have to deal with the kind of drama that will destroy us. Because Abram recognizes the Lord said he's going to bless me no matter what. This young man, on the other hand, decides that he is going to go the other way. And so he goes toward the plain. I don't know if you recognize this. We live in the city, so we don't talk about hills and valleys. We don't talk about plains, and we don't talk about the different types of terrain, but a plain actually is a flat place. A plain is a place that is smooth, and we recognize that Lot went on to the plain. He went on to the smooth place to pitch his tent, but he was pitching his tent toward a city that was doomed. Every now and then life will seem very easy for us, and things will seem like they're going well. We're happy because everything seems smooth in my life right now. It's smooth because I got a new boo that I'm hooked up with. It's smooth because I just got a new job and I don't have to worry about money no more. I had the folk down at the church praying for me a job, but now that I got one, I don't even have to go by the church anymore. You know, every now and then life seems like it's running smooth for you. You know, when you're sick, you call the pastor and say, could you come and pray for me over at the hospital? But as soon as they put you on the new medication and you got a good heart rhythm again, you keep on moving the way you want to move. The plain seems nice, but you're headed toward a Sodom and Gomorrah. You're headed toward destruction. Every now and then we're going to have some mountains in our life. There's going to be some valleys, some hills. There's going to be some obstacles. Abram went on to the land of Canaan. Those were some strangers, some folk that didn't like him. And there are times where we are going to have to give up our happy life to go through some struggles. But when God has promised never to leave us, to protect us in season and out of season, when God has the blessing upon our life, then we can keep on keeping on in spite of who comes or goes, in spite of whatever they might do to us. I know a man named Jesus that didn't find the plain all the time, but he stopped by the hill called Calvary. There are some hills in our life that we've got to stop by. There's some struggles, there's some strain, there's some stress that sometimes comes in our life. He stopped by Calvary for you and for me. He bled, died, and suffered on the hill called Calvary. They hung him high and stretched him wide. They placed him in a borrowed tomb. He had both his mountain experience and his valley experience. But I'm glad that he knew that the Father had his back, for he recognized that God would raise him again on the third day. And so you and I sometime will be on the mountain, sometime we'll be trapped in the valley, but keep on holding on, because resurrection day is coming. Because I heard the songwriter say he's coming back again. I recognize the writer says he's coming back again, and so I want to be ready when he returns. I don't want to be found in strife. I don't want to be found fighting. I don't want to be found mad at everybody. I want to be found happy with my Savior. I want to be found on the journey. I'm on my way home to a better day, to a better tomorrow. And so on that great getting up morning, I can say fare thee well to this world and hello to my Savior, where every day is howdy and never goodbye. It's all right when we hold on. to what God has for us. We don't have to be caught up in the greed. We don't have to be caught up in the pride. We don't have to be caught up in what looks greener. Because my life is greener. My life is greater. My life is better. My life is sweeter. My life is because God is.